I'd never really seen an electric light. We worked off generators. I'd never seen television, and I'd only seen one traffic light. And I show up in London in mid-1960s, we're in a place where it never got dark, and street lights and buildings everywhere. I'd never been in an elevator, a lift, and it was a remarkable change for me. And now, coming back here after all these years, it brings back a flood of memories of my early days at St. Mary's Hospital when I was a medical student in the 1960s. It was a remarkable change for me. It was as though I died and woken up in another planet, as you can imagine. The streets never got quiet. You could never see the stars. It rained. One day I saw ice in the streets. I thought somebody had put it there. And when I was a medical student, I worked for a man called Escott, Felix Escott. He was a famous vascular surgeon. He's dead now. And he was the first man to do a carotid endarterectomy in 1955. Denton Cooley thought he did the first in 1957, but I subsequently corrected Denton on that fact. And at that time, they thought the only way to interrupt the circulation to the brain was to completely freeze the patient, put them into hypothermia. And so that first operation was done with the patient anesthetized in an ice bath, and they cooled the temperature down in a room at St. Mary's Hospital where I worked. St. Mary's Hospital, incidentally, was where Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. And at around 2 in the afternoon, after being there all day, they started this operation. And the nurse's teeth were chattering, of course. And it was an all-day operation, but it was a success. And that patient lived for many years afterwards. And that started, actually, at that time, one of the most commonly performed vascular operations, carotid endarterectomy. But at that time, it literally took all day. And when I was a medical student working for Escott in the 1960s, it was my job in the early, dark, often cold mornings to carry a sack of ice over my shoulder up from the ground floor to the 4th floor where the operating room were to deliver the ice so Escott could do his endarterectomy operations. Well, anyway, I was very privileged, and in 1970 I went on to be Escott's houseman, also called an intern. And this was a privileged job because Escott was the senior surgeon in the hospital. And I reflect back on that a lot now because we are talking in this meeting about surgical education and training and so on. But in 1970, when I was Escott's houseman for 6 months, for the 6 months, I never left the hospital, except with Escott. And I had a room in the hospital, and I was paid £50 for the 6 months. Now, you might think that's not very much, but as a matter of fact, I've never been so well off. I had no expenses, no wives, no mortgage, no dog, nothing. No lawyers. But we were expected to work all the time. Officially, we had every other night off. But of course, it didn't work like that. You were expected to be on all the time. And I remember very well one night, it was not officially my night on, and it was midnight, and I was checking on my patients, and I was in a clean white coat with a white shirt and pants, but no tie. And Escott came in. It was the Zachary Cope ward at St. Mary's Hospital. Zachary Cope was a famous old surgeon at St. Mary's. And I saw Escott in the distance standing at the doorway. What he was doing at midnight in the hospital, I have no idea. Probably calling in after a dinner party. But I saw him there, and so I went to greet him. And he looked at me and he said, "Ah, it's you, Jameson. Without your tie, I thought it was a boy from the village." But anyway, I have to say that being totally immersed in surgery, as we were, we knew everything about our patients, everything that happened after we did them to it, that this was a remarkable privilege. And one of the things that we've lost, I think, and probably going to lose even more in the future, is that with restricted hours, and we have them in the United States, I'm sure you have them here, as we go forward, we lose that immersion and continuity of care. And the working hours have reduced, but the length of training hasn't increased. And that's a dilemma. In any event, I grew to be quite fond of Felix. They called him Felix. His name was Harry Hubert Eastcott, but they called him Felix because he walked around like this with his arms clasped behind his back like Felix the cat. So they called him Felix, not to his face. But on Saturdays, he would ask me to go operate with him as his assistant at King Edward Hospital, which was a private hospital. So I worked for Felix for 6 months, and every weekend I worked with him at the private clinic. And Felix never gave anybody any money to help him with his private cases, but at the end of 6 months he gave me a check. And the check was for £25, which doesn't seem much to you, but for me was a fabulous sum. And I was so proud of this that I walked around showing everybody, all my colleagues, this check. And I said, "I'm so good, Felix actually gave me a check." And they looked at it and they said, "Well, yes, it is a check made out to you, and it is a check for £25, but he hasn't signed it." So this provided a very significant dilemma. And I spent several days with the assistance of my friends drafting a very cautious letter to Mr. Eastcott saying how overwhelmed with gratitude I was, but since he had forgotten to sign it, would he remedy that, and I'd be most grateful. And I sent this check back with my cautious letter. That was the end of the matter. I never saw the check again. So we're here in the Royal College. When I took my fellowship exam in 1970, this was the Royal College of England, Felix was one of the examiners, and he was a tough examiner. And in those days, I'm sure it's different now, they only passed about 10% of the candidates. And there was one person, and they had the exams in the spring and in autumn. And one person hadn't fared very well in Felix's hands. And he put his hand on the shoulder, took him to the window, and he said, "Do you see the leaves on that tree?" This was in the springtime. And the guy said, "Oh, yes, sir, yes, I see them." He said, "Well, when the leaves fall off that tree, come back again." And it was tough in those days, and I'm sure it's different. But after the final examination, you were called into the great hall of the Royal College of Surgeons. And all the examinees, you all had a number, and you were gathered around at the bottom, and there's this great staircase. And at the top, one of the porters, one of the orderlies, stood there in a white coat. And he would call out your number, number 1. And in front of everybody, you'd walk up the staircase, and he'd say, "Mr. Jones?" You'd say, "Yes." He'd say, "Failed." And you had to walk all the way down again. And And about 1 in 10 passed, you know. He'd get to number 10. Mr. Smith, yes, congratulations, sir, you've passed. And you could walk past and go into the library where all the examiners were drinking sherry. I don't know, is that the same now? Probably not. But anyway, I have great memories of England and great memories. I was actually here for 10 years before I went for a fellowship to America, to Stanford. And it was a year's fellowship, but I never came back. I intended to come back, but events didn't work out that way. But here we are all these years later, and this is a wonderful society. It's the only truly international society that we have. And as I look around the room, there are people from all over the world. And this is a vital society that grows, and we must keep alive because it was founded by the original pioneers of cardiac surgery, most of whom are dead now. And it's our legacy to carry into the future the vision that they had, that we would always have a society that would go to different parts of the world every year and enable those people from different parts of the world to be exposed to the leaders, the thought leaders and the surgical leaders currently from all over the world, and give an opportunity for younger people in those regions to present their work. And I think you'd all agree that's a noble goal. Well, the steering committee of the society has decided, as some of you know probably, that next year's meeting is going to be in Cape Town, South Africa, and that will be a wonderful meeting under Dr. Klein-Luke, and it would be great to see most of you there, and now's the time to start thinking about that. The year after that, which will be in 2017, will be in Astana, Kazakhstan, which is an unbelievable place. And I've been there together with the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Prappas. They are doing great surgical and medical work, and it's a place that you really have to see, almost to believe. They've grown this huge, unbelievable city out of nothing in the space of 25 years. Very worthwhile experience. And after that, the meeting will be in Ljubljana in Slovenia. And we've visited there as well. And for those of you that haven't been there, this is a spectacular country. And in the main part of the city, there's this beautiful historic place that goes back thousands of years, and there's no traffic allowed in the city, and there are all the hotels there, and you can walk everywhere, and the conference center is right there. And that will be a spectacular meeting. And the steering committee decided today that the year after that, which is in 2019, right, will be in Istanbul, in Turkey. And I'm sure many of you have been there, but that, of course, speaks for itself. Just an unbelievable, historic, beautiful city. And we are currently taking bids for 2020. So one thing that Vipin has been working on is to be sure that everybody signs up for their membership. And the membership level's been set at a very low level. It's £60, $100. And the benefits of membership are many, of course, but most of all, you have access to the website and you have access to the unbelievable wealth of knowledge from the experts that are part of the society. Everybody who is significant in any way is part of the society. So please go ahead and sign up. Well, I'd like to conclude by thanking Vipin for organizing a fabulous meeting. Vipin is president for this next year, so if you have any complaints at all, don't direct them to me. Please direct them to Dr. Vipin. So I'd like to just introduce, to say a few words, the Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Prappas from Athens. The structure of the society, as you know, is made up of the Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellor. The current President is the person who was the chairman of the meeting the year before. The steering committee is made up of approximately 16 select leaders in every geographical part of the world, plus all the previous presidents. So, Soterios, would you say a few words? Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I haven't been prepared for a speech, and I don't like the atmosphere that Stuart created, describing his experience in UK. As you know, my English is not fluent, and as always, I'm going to speak from my soul. First of all, I have to congratulate Vipin for two things. First, for the nice idea to organize these tables in order to remind to us all the previous congresses around the world. In each table, in the most of them, are sitting the presidents of the congresses they organized there. The second one for the great congress he organized, and I believe that Vipin Zamvar will be an asset in our society, and I think he's going to add his organizing ability, his academician personality, and his decision to work hardly in our society. You have to know that I am the third generation of free Greeks. My grandfather was born on 1900 and was the first free Greek, and he took he was responsible to take care for some gods, that's all. My father was a builder, and he lost his left hand in the Second World War. I am the third generation of Greeks, and I feel very proud that I'm here as a Vice Chancellor of this society, representing all the developing countries, all the peripheral countries, in order to keep the target alive. And the target was described by Stuart. It's not to create another prestigious society like Europeans, like Americans, etc., but to go everywhere in Africa, in Central Asia, in all the parts of the world in which the people is thirsting to see an international congress to be organized there, to see persons from developed countries, to give them the opportunity to exchange experience, to learn more. And that will be the target. And the second one, I believe, will be ahead, will be a humanitarian program for all these countries. They need some help doing operations and training people from there. I don't like to bother you saying more. Thank you for the opportunity to grade all of you. You have to know that we are stronger now, we are more mature. We intend to work hardly, and we are experienced more in order to go the society ahead. Stuart Jameson leads this society since 2008 with wisdom, with balance, accepting all the propositions and the good ideas. That we need is the help of you. Independently if you belong to another society, locally society or continental society, we need all of you in the world society to succeed these targets, to go everywhere, to help everyone, and to give this podium to people from developing countries. There is no other possibility to have this opportunity to the other societies. Thank you very much. I wish you a good sequence and all the best for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sotirios. Those who know the history of the World Society, the World Society of Cardiothoracic Surgeons has traditionally focused very heavily on cardiac surgery. In this particular meeting, I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, but in this particular meeting, we have concentrated a lot on thoracic surgery. And I would like to invite Joel Dunning here to speak about a very prominent thoracic surgeon who's sitting in our midst.
Thank you very much, Vipin, and thank you for the invitation here to the World Society. This has been an absolutely fabulous conference. I've been tremendously impressed by the brilliant people you have brought here. And on behalf of all of us, I would like to apologise to your wife for stealing you for a year, because you have worked so hard, and you'll be delighted to have him back shortly, I'm sure. Now, Vipin has been working for over a year on this conference, and he asked me at that stage to get involved with this. But I was tremendously impressed by Vipin because he felt this night, the absolute pinnacle of the conference, he wanted to do something special. He wanted to give an award to somebody that has helped us so much in our careers. This gentleman has helped the whole community of cardiothoracic surgery, and he has also helped Vipin locally in Edinburgh and myself. So obviously, we're here to honour you, Mr. Walker. Now, there are those of you out there who know Mr. Walker very well. He absolutely hates the limelight. In fact, I'm guessing you would rather be swallowed up by a haggis right now than I actually talk about you over the next few minutes. So I'll keep it quick and don't run away. But what better place for us to acknowledge his achievements than here in Edinburgh, where he has spent his whole career? And what better place than here in the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh? So the other thing that is so special is that he's here with so many of the people that he has worked with over the years, and also he is here with a mixed group of cardiac and thoracic surgeons. Bill Walker is the godfather of European vasculopectomy, but let us not forget also he is a very accomplished cardiac surgeon, and particularly a very good aortic surgeon, and he does some of the highest risk aortic surgery procedures in Scotland as well. So it's a particular pleasure to pay this tribute to you tonight. Now, every specialty needs pioneers. We only need a few pioneers though. Most of us must be jobbing surgeons that work hard, and we actually need a few skeptics as well. Now, it would seem that it would be the best fun to be a pioneer, but it's actually not. Being a pioneer is difficult, it's dangerous. There are people out there that will do you down, so it is not easy to be a pioneer. And certainly, Bill Walker has to go through difficult things when he did his first procedure. So, his first vasculopectomy. This was on the 1st of April 1992 that he did the first vasculopectomy. Now, today it sounds quite easy. Oh, I did my first vasculopectomy, because there are training programs. You know, there's a lot of people here maybe that did their first lobectomy. But when Bill Walker did his first lobectomy, there was no proctoring, there were no videos, there wasn't a textbook. All he had was his open instruments and a staple gun from a rep. who said that he was sure people were doing it quite a lot in America. That was enough of a red rag for him to go for it, and I have tremendous respect for that. So I have your first operation note. This is the first operation note of the first Václavectomy that he did, the 1st of the 4th, 1992. That's April Fool's Day, isn't it? You chose a left upper lobectomy. Why? That's the most difficult lobe, but anyway, there's something. Now, it's also a few interesting parts about it. One of it, you had an anaesthetist called Dr. Pugh. Your assistant was Fiona Carnacan, and I'm not sure if she's here today, but Fiona, I imagine, was so horrified from what she saw on that day that she resolved to stick by you for the next 20 years at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, probably just to keep you safe. And she has worked with you ever since then till this present day. Now, when you look at this, the thing that really strikes you about this operation note, and also the thing that summarises Mr. Walker, is the fact that he worked out exactly how to do that operation in his mind before he walked into that operating room. The list here of how he did the operation is virtually what he does today, and virtually the operation he has made a success over 20 years. And that is a tremendous tribute for someone who can, from first principles, work out the right method. And that is tremendously impressive. You had a few differences. You started with 4 ports. You then started the arms race of reducing ports by going down to 3. And that arms race, I believe, is still continuing. And you also used your Fisher-based technique. Now, that first operation is impressive, but people do first operations. It's like having an idea for an invention. It is possible to do. Now, what I am so impressed about is not that first operation, it was the determination to carry on. In 1992, people were excited about Václavectomy. They started doing it for a few years. And then in 1995, a randomized study came out comparing muscle-sparing lobectomy versus VATS. Václavectomy did very badly. The conclusion of that study was that it is dangerous for people to operate on the pulmonary artery in a closed chest, and interest in that technique disappeared. The literature disappeared. In that time, remember this was 1995 to 2000, exciting times were happening in cardiac surgery. There was off-pump, there was aortic surgery, mitral repair, there were big waiting lists in the UK, and so everybody's attention was off Václavectomy. But this is where pioneers earn their stripes. Mr. Walker continued doing this technique throughout those dark years, and the other really impressive thing is that he kept his own beautiful database himself to collect his data. So when the clouds parted and people decided that Václavectomy was something to look into, he had 13 years of experience and 13 years of data. And this comes to the next part, which makes pioneers great like yourself, and that is training. So you welcome people from all over the world to see this technique, and you set up a fellowship to train surgeons. Now, you had quite a quiet year in 2011 from applications, so unfortunately there was only me to come. So I somehow got in and came and spent an excellent year with Bill Walker. I'm personally very proud of the 59 Václavectomies I did in Edinburgh, but actually the thing that strikes me about my year there is not my 59, it's the fact that in that year Mr. Walker did 1 Václavectomy. That's all he did. Now, people here in the audience will marvel, I think, at a person who can have the patience to watch a trainee like me muddle through so many operations without taking over. And I do know myself that a couple of conversions would not have happened if he'd done all the operations skin to skin. So it is a tremendous tribute to you that you did so little during that year. Now, I have voices in my head. I'm sorry to tell you this. The voice in my head when I do Václavectomy is a slightly lilting Scottish accent. And the thing that comes to mind very often indeed are the words, "My goodness, Joel, I didn't know the pulmonary artery was that strong," which he used to say quite often. You've been a great pioneer through difficult times, and you've been an outstanding trainer. Mr. Walker describes this as his metastases, and I'm pleased to tell everybody here that there's widespread metastatic disease across Europe today because of you. I was with René Peterson last week, and he also paid you the very great tribute that he said while we were in conversation. He felt you were a real true research scientist, because he said you had written one of the very best papers he had read on the benefits of vaxlobectomy, because you performed a very carefully considered trial of inflammatory markers and cytokines in Edinburgh, and he thought that was a true piece of science when others write much lower level papers, and that is yet another element of vaxlobectomy here. So where do we place Bill Walker among the League of Pioneers? Well, we're going to South Africa next year, and obviously they have their pioneers. Christian Barnard performed the first transplant in 1967. He's not quite like yourself, Christian Barnard. When he'd done his transplant, he immediately got on the front page of Time magazine, and he then shortly after embarked on a tour of the USA where he gave over 160 talks in 6 months. He had such a big tour, he brought over his own taxi driver, a South African, to do this with him, because he would be giving 2 or 3 or even more talks each day. Now, it was on one such day that he was coming into quite a small, obscure town, and he said to the driver, he said, "Hey, you keep telling me that you've heard this so many times that you could do it. I'm tired. This is your chance. You're going to do this talk." The driver's South African, they're hard over there. And he said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." They looked fairly similar. So the driver strided confidently into the room as Christian Barnard sat at the back. He shook the mayor's hand, he shook all the dignitaries' hands, and he stood up to the lectern to give the speech. He gave an absolutely perfect speech. He flicked through the slides, it was immaculate. At the end, he sat down to a standing ovation. The chairman stood up and said, "That was absolutely fantastic. Are there any questions?" Some questions came, but he'd heard them all. He'd heard everything. It was immaculately. He answered them perfectly, to a further round of applause. And then a retired professor stood up and said, "Mr. Barnard, I'm somewhat confused of your immunomodulatory regime and mechanism of action. Could you please explain this?" He stood back. He looked at the professor. He looked at the back of the room. And he said, "Professor, that is possibly the stupidest question I have ever heard in my life. Why, that's so stupid, I'm going to get my driver to answer that from the back of the room." Mr. Walker, I don't think you're a Christian Barnard. I personally think that you are the thoracic Norman Shumway. You're thoughtful, you're very scientific, you work things out from first principles. But above all, you're the best first assistant I've ever had. And so it's with that I'd like to invite Vipin Zamvar to the lectern to present an award.
Thank you, Joe. Very nice. This is the 25th anniversary meeting of the World Society of Cardiothoracic Surgeons. And in this 25th year, for the first time in the history of our society, we have decided to honor Bill Walker with a Lifetime Achievement Award. I have known Bill for 13 years now. Bill is a gentleman surgeon, an excellent colleague, completely dedicated to his patients, and totally passionate about thoracic surgery. As Joel mentioned, he was one of the first thoracoscopic surgeons in the world, and over the last 25 years, he has trained and mentored dozens of surgeons who now practice all over the world. Bill is a kind of person who shies away from accolades, and I was sure that if Bill knew about this, he would try and persuade us not to do it. So Bill does not know about it. He's just heard about it like everybody else. So Bill, do you want to come up here? So I feel very humbled, very honored, and very privileged to be able to on behalf of the World Society of Cardiothoracic Surgeons, to present this Lifetime Achievement Award to Bill Walker.
Well, I must thank you, Vipin. I must thank the Society. I must thank Joel. And I think I'll retire at this point because I've got to reach the end of it. But in the end, it's been a journey and a great pleasure to develop VATS lobectomy, but above all, rewarding to have young men come work with us and then carry that, hopefully not just the technique, but some ideas about how to develop it, as Joel has already done quite remarkably. So it's been a privilege for me, and I think probably it's amazing. It makes you think back over those years from the beginning, all the difficulties we had with instruments, all the strange events when the instruments didn't do quite what they were meant to do and the staplers misfired. All the times whilst we worked out new strategies for how to deal with things. And I've been greatly supported by Fiona, who was mentioned, and by all the nursing team and by my colleagues. In particular, my now late colleague, Mr. Evan Cameron, who was the senior surgeon in our unit, and I don't think anyone could have had a better person to come to maturity under, so I think of him quite frequently. This is a great society. It's been a privilege to meet with many of you from different countries and to admire at the sessions the work that you're all doing. I completely share the concept that we need to take a global view of things and not sit in little camps and be separate. We all have things to offer to each other, whether it's high tech at one end or how to deal with the massively difficult inflammatory case at the other. So I thank you all. I thank you, Vipin, and I thank you, Joel. My pleasure.
Thank you, Bill. Now it is time to say thank you to all those who've made this conference possible. Now, before I start with the thank yous, let me moan a little bit. But having Bill in the department, Joel remembers the 59 VATS lobectomies he did. He does not remember the 12 open lobectomies and the 5 pneumonectomies he did with me.
Let me stand up.
But anyway, it's time for thank yous. My first contact with the World Society of Cardiothoracic Surgeons was in 2012, when Leslie Williams from Edinburgh Marketing came up to me one day and said, "Vipin, would you like to be an ambassador for the city of Edinburgh and go to Vancouver and bid for Edinburgh to be the host for the 25th conference, for the 25th anniversary conference?" And never one to say no to anything. And without having done any research about the World Society, and without having given any thought to what is involved in organizing a world conference, I said yes immediately. And I went to Vancouver then, and the Edinburgh Marketing were such nice people. They gave me a PowerPoint and they gave me a CD. So my job only was to go in there and talk about the slides that were being presented. And so basically we were trying to sell Edinburgh as a venue for the 25th anniversary conference. And the steering committee led by Stuart Jamieson decided to offer Edinburgh the chance to host the 25th conference. So thank you, Stuart. Thank you very much, Stuart and fellow colleagues. And at this point, let me digress from saying thank yous to everybody. Let me just say that the next meeting is in South Africa, in Cape Town in 2016. In 2017, we are going to Kazakhstan, as Stuart mentioned, and in 2018, we are going to Slovenia. And this afternoon, we decided that in 2019, we'll go to Istanbul in Turkey. So we do not have a venue for 2020 yet. So I would like to ask all delegates and all faculty members here to give serious consideration to the idea of bringing the World Society to your cities or to your countries, and you can make a bid for it. And in 2020, we will be looking at it. It's a great experience organizing a conference. Now, coming back to the thank yous, the last 1 year has been very, very busy, and I'd like to mention a few people. Now, Edinburgh is a wonderful city, and I had a choice of many different conference venues, and I made a short list of 3 venues. As you have seen over the last 3 days, the Royal College of Surgeons is not a purpose-built conference center. It is a 500-year-old institution. The buildings are centuries old, and over the years, extra bits have been added to the buildings one by one. So it is not a purpose-built conference center. The campus is spread out, and this might make it difficult for the delegates to go about from one venue to another. But my gut instinct was, my intuition was, that the surgeons who come here will be very impressed with the majestic grandeur of the Royal College. And I think my intuition was proved right. The Royal College has been a fantastic venue. And I must say thank you to Ian Ritchie, who unfortunately is not here today. He is the president of the Royal College of Surgeons, and he was very, very supportive. If I had a problem, I just had to send him an email and it would be sorted. I must also say thank you to Leonie Postma, who again is not here today. She is the face of the World Society 2015 conference. You must have all communicated with her over email over the last few months. And not only was she incredibly hardworking, she was very smart as well. She could anticipate problems and she could have solutions before they become real issues. But this morning, she went to Mexico with a piping band, so she is not with us here today. And I would also like to thank Paul, who was my first contact with the Royal College, and you made the initial plans for this conference. Now, Araceli Segreto is Leonie's assistant, and she was drafted into the team about 2 months ago when it became apparent that the workload was too much for just one person. And Araceli, you have worked tirelessly over the last 2 months. You have often stayed in the Royal College till 11 or 12 in the night, completing tasks. And I would like to say a big thank you to you. So can we give a big round of applause to Araceli? I would also like to say thank you to our sponsors and exhibitors. I mean, your support has been very good, and it has taken a lot of burden off the organizing committee. Now, the support of the industry has been very good, but it was late coming. And I hope that you all members of the industry here, contact Robert very soon and start offering your support to him, because the next meeting is going to be much bigger and much better than this one. Now, at the heart of any meeting is the academic content of what is discussed here. The rest all is secondary. And I believe that this program academically was very good. And that is because of the faculty that we have over here. The faculty has been excellent. They have traveled from different parts of the world. They have given their time preparing the lectures and preparing the talks. And they have given their time to come over here. So I'm very, very grateful to each and every member of the faculty here. There are more than 100 faculty members, and I'm so grateful to all of you. And maybe just one person I would like to mention. I would like to mention Professor Kalangos. He mentioned about the work that he does with children in disadvantaged parts of the world. And I would also like to thank you for the leadership you provided to the society over the last 12 months. So thank you, Professor Kalangos. I would also like to thank all the delegates who have come from all parts of the world to Edinburgh today, at this time. And I would also mention that amongst our delegates, there are 40 medical students. There are medical students from Australia, from Canada, from the USA, from Cornwall, from Europe, from Russia, from all parts of the world. So the future of our specialty is secure. When medical students feel that they want to come, they want to travel across half the world to present a paper or present the research that they have done, I think we should have no doubts about the future of our specialty. I would also like to thank members of the local organizing committee. All 3 cardiothoracic centers from Scotland were very heavily involved in the organization of this meeting. I would like to thank Keith Buchan and Hussein Al-Shafi from Aberdeen. I'd like to thank Jeff Berg, Nawar Al-Attar, who is not here today, Mark Danton from Glasgow, and I would like to thank all my colleagues from Edinburgh. And I would also like to thank you, Thasek from Newcastle and Simon from Middlesbrough. You have all been a great support, and you have supported. This conference is possible only because of all of you. Now, working for the Congress has taken a lot of my time. I have a very busy cardiothoracic surgical practice, but I must say that I'm very lucky to have the kind of colleagues that I have. And they have helped me, they have helped to lighten my clinical workload so that any time when I had to go to the Royal College, my colleagues were there to look after my patients. So thank you very much, Bill Walker again, Renzo, Sai Prasad, Kelvin, and Fiona Carnohan, who's not here today. So can I just give a big round of applause, ask all of you for my colleagues in Edinburgh. And last of all, perhaps the biggest support has been my wife, Usha. And I must thank you for all your patience. For the last 6 to 7 months, Usha has gone to sleep with me lying next to her with the pitter-patter of the keyboard of my laptop as I have been writing and answering emails. I promise you that day after tomorrow, you will have more time with me. So thank you, Usha. And as with any major event, there must be some things which have not gone so well. So if there has been anything which did not meet your expectations, I'm sorry. And I know some of you are staying in Edinburgh for a few more days to explore Edinburgh and Scotland, but most of you are going back home tomorrow. So to all of those who are going away tomorrow, I wish you a very safe journey back home. And thank you very much, and I'd like to see all of you in Cape Town next year. Thank you. I forgot to mention one thing. Now, yesterday at 6 o'clock in the evening, you must all have received an email from Leonie. You must all have received an email from Leonie asking you to be members of the World Society. Some of you have become members, but for the remaining, can I ask you, please, before you go to sleep tonight, click on that link and become a member of the World Society. Thank you.